Yo, what went down on First Take this morning regarding a completely wild hypothetical trade scenario between two bitter rivals is going to make you question whether something this insane could ever actually happen in today's NFL. And I'm not talking about some realistic trade proposal that league executives are actually discussing behind closed doors. We're talking about Stephen A. Smith bringing up the absolutely bonkers idea of the Raiders trading their defensive superstar Max Crosby to the 49ers in exchange for quarterback Brock Purdy. We're talking about the panel debating whether either fan base could even stomach seeing their franchise player wearing the other team's uniform. And we're talking about examining the actual football logic behind why each organization might theoretically consider such a blockbuster swap, even though it seems completely unthinkable on the surface. When Molly Karam set up the segment by explaining this was purely hypothetical speculation and not actual reporting, when Stephen A. and the panel started breaking down the strategic reasoning each team might have, when they analyzed Purdy's impressive resume versus Crosby's elite defensive impact, I had to pause, because this wasn't just throwing random names together for shock value. This was actually thinking through a fascinating what-if scenario that touches on fundamental questions about team building, positional value, and franchise direction. Hey Raiders fans! If you're following along with this analysis, I have a dream: to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel. It would be incredible to have you on this journey with me. Go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's grow together. Your subscription means the world to me and the future of this channel. Now, let's keep going because there's still so much more to discuss. So, I'm watching First Take during their morning programming when they pivoted to discussing NFL trade deadline speculation with less than a month to go before the first week of November, and Stephen A. Smith had this mischievous look on his face, like he was about to say something absolutely outrageous that would get everyone fired up. The context for this whole discussion came from reports last week that the 49ers were actively pursuing a defensive end or pass rusher, with their general manager going on Bay Area media saying, "We're going to be making an effort to get a pass rusher. We're having good conversations about doing that." So naturally, when you have a big game hunting team like San Francisco looking for a difference maker while trying to stay in Super Bowl contention, who are you going to call? The first thought process would be to reach out about potentially the best pass rusher available in Max Crosby. But then Stephen A. took it to another level by suggesting a viewer had proposed the idea of trading Max Crosby for Brock Purdy, and he wanted to explore whether there was any actual football logic behind such an insane swap. Now he prefaced the entire segment multiple times by emphasizing this is purely hypothetical. This is not being reported anywhere by mainstream media or credible insiders. This is just posing ideas and exploring the thought process of potentially seeing these franchise players in each other's uniforms. Stephen A. was acknowledging up front that Raiders and Niners fans probably couldn't stomach their guy looking like that in the rival's colors, but he wanted to examine it anyway as a thought exercise. Let me paint you the complete picture of what really transpired during this extended segment that went deep into the reasoning each team might have, because the surface-level, crazy trade proposal framing completely misses the actual strategic logic about positional value and franchise-building philosophy, the specific circumstances that might make this appealing to each organization, why Purdy's age and playoff success might outweigh Crosby's defensive dominance from a long-term perspective, and the uncomfortable reality that even beloved franchise players can be moved if the business case is compelling enough. Here's the argument for why each team would theoretically consider this swap. If you're inquiring about Max Crosby, you're talking about someone who Raiders fans know best in the sport as a top 3 pass rusher, arguably the best because of hometown bias, but objectively a multi-time Pro Bowler with over 60 career sacks, who just came off a dual-sack performance this past weekend against Tennessee. Any team would understandably want that kind of game-wrecking defensive presence, but you'd have to give something significant to get him. Shannon Sharpe was making this observation. If the 49ers are looking at their situation thinking, we're banged up on defense, we don't know which way these injury situations are going. Maybe we can't afford to give up multiple first-round draft picks in a trade, but maybe we can afford to look at what we have at quarterback. Maybe they could offer Purdy because their backup has been playing pretty well, and maybe that makes the incumbent Purdy a bit more expendable than people think. And for a Raiders team that's completely void at the quarterback position in both the present and future, Purdy's resume is actually not half bad when you examine it objectively. The panel put up Purdy's statistics and accomplishments on screen. His winning percentage adds up to 31 win-win. He's in 17 losses, which is elite, including an impressive 4-2 record in playoff games. The touchdown-to-interception ratio and completion percentage are solid numbers you can live with. He's a Pro Bowler. But the really compelling number that Stephen A. kept circling back to is that Purdy is only 25 years old. Everyone loves Max Crosby and everything he does on the football field. He's an absolute game changer and game wrecker who's fantastic and probably belongs on the Mount Rushmore of Raiders defensive players in franchise history. But here's the critical point that Stephen A. was hammering home. A defensive end, no matter how elite, is not going to be the singular difference in transforming your franchise going forward in terms of putting you over the top to championship contention. It's a really nice piece to have, an incredibly valuable piece to have, but so is a 25-year-old quarterback who's already played in a Super Bowl and has had legitimate postseason success. That's an extremely valuable thing to have for a franchise. Mad Dog Russo was exploring this angle. If that trade scenario were to present itself and the backup becomes the guy in San Francisco, you'd have to think about it seriously as a Raiders decision-maker. If the 49ers are reaching the conclusion internally that we have the backup situation already lined up, we can't trust Purdy long-term for various reasons, or at least it's a cheaper financial route, we can't build around him because we're tight on salary cap space. And meanwhile, their entire defensive side of the ball is banged up with key players getting hurt. Then maybe their general manager is thinking, Brock, you've done a lot of good things for us, but thank you for your service. You've got to give to get. In this hypothetical, you'd be sending Purdy to a place where he would automatically have the keys to the franchise and be the unquestioned starter. He would be in an offensive system that's functional, or at least has the blueprint of what would be functional if they execute properly, having a solid quarterback, a solid running back when healthy, and a good receiving option in their tight end. You'd assume reasonable draft picks on the way, you'd shore up that offensive line, and if you're the Raiders, you don't have to worry about filling the quarterback need in the first round, because you could use that pick on a blindside tackle or other position of need. From San Francisco's perspective in this hypothetical, they'd be thinking, we have a lot of holes we need to fill on the defensive side if we're going to be considered legitimate Super Bowl contenders and make a genuine push. Durden, there's also the head coach's legacy component where his reputation is somewhat on the line. If you move on from Purdy, you potentially put yourself in a position where you could part ways with the head coach as well. Then, if you keep your first-round pick instead of dealing it in a trade, you hit the reset button, get your new coach, get your new quarterback through the draft, and for the immediate future, you have Max Crosby anchoring your defense. The panel was debating whether that's a reasonable enough conversation to at least have internally, and Stephen A. thought there was an argument for each fan base to make compelling points on both sides. But when Molly asked Stephen A. directly what he personally would do, he admitted it's interesting food for thought, but he couldn't actually pull the trigger on trading Max Crosby for Brock Purdy. His reasoning centered on Purdy's injury concerns accumulating for a 25-year-old, and while he thinks Purdy is a solid player and a winner, those injury worries are genuinely scary. Stephen A. said he would not be willing to sell the face of the franchise for that, especially in a place where stopgap quarterbacks have been the norm in recent years. Shannon Sharpe agreed, saying he'd rather see the Raiders go through the draft this year to take a young signal caller and as a result give some balance to the roster while keeping a defensive superstar who has done everything you could possibly ask and then some. The only thing Crosby hasn't done yet is win games at the championship level, and it would be great to see him in silver and black for his entire career. Though everyone acknowledges business sometimes gets in the way, and that might not happen. Here's what really emerged from this entire First Take segment. Even though this trade proposal is purely hypothetical and not being reported anywhere, exploring it raises fascinating questions about positional value in today's NFL. Whether elite pass rushers or young proven quarterbacks are more valuable to building championship contenders, and whether bitter rivals could ever stomach a trade of this magnitude involving their respective franchise cornerstones, even if the football logic somehow made sense.